And from the book of Hypocrites, chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And God said unto Abraham Lincoln, Thou shalt sacrifice half thy nation's sons, so as to end slavery. Then you shall enact new laws, so that you can now re-enslave the newly freed slaves, without calling it slavery. This is the word of white Jesus.
Oh, so fabulous.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel once again. It's your girl Dumebi. If this is your first time coming across my channel, you're welcome. I do hope you decide to subscribe. And if you are a returning subscriber, you guys know that I love you. It's so good to have you here. Welcome back. Please, as usual, this video is strictly for educational purposes. Please do not go searching out the people that I talk about in this video. Don't send them any form of hate comments, threats, or violence. This channel does not support any of that. So there's this video that has been making the rounds. I'm guessing you guys might have seen it, but just in case you haven't, it was a sermon that was given by this man called Mike Keller. He's a minister, so this happened in a church, and he is the father of Anaduga. I think she's a reality TV star. So this man in question got on the pulpit and had the most delusional thing, the craziest take on slavery that I've ever heard. You guys brace yourselves. Let me just go right ahead and play his video.
150 years ago, or 200 years ago, when the blacks were slaves, did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally 200 years ago to protest against slavery? Did they? No. What did they do? Well, a lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime. Let us help build a church for you, dear folks. And they loved them and taught them how to read so they can read the Bible. And here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They prayed. They sought God's face and they turned from their wicked ways. And God made slavery illegal through several white presidents, right? It worked, didn't it? They didn't protest. Maybe there's a place for protest. I don't know. But there's sometimes that was a wise pastor that warned his flock.
Is that not the most ridiculous thing that, like, see, you guys, when I was watching that video, my jaw dropped. I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm like, is it the same version of slavery we're talking about, or is it like an alternate reality kind of thing he's talking about? The black people who were slaves did not protest. They didn't have any form of resistance. They were so nice and subservient, asking the white people, oh, can we build you guys some churches? They taught them how to read so that they could read the Bible. They were so obedient. You know what, you guys? Let me just go right ahead and play stitches to that video.
A lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime.
Every time he said the blacks, it was just like, he said, I remember when you niggers used to just take the captivity and be humble about it. Now you want to complain and you want to protest. Never mind the over 30 documented slave rebellions that we have in this country, and those just the documented ones. Never mind the ways that enslaved people used to break materials and tools to make it where they would mess up the productivity on the plantation in protest. That don't matter. You're supposed to just pray, be docile, and be pacified with the Holy God spirit. And y'all notice when he talked about the good people on the plantation, he was talking about the human traffickers, the enslavers. You know what I'm saying? The same people that want to tell you to stay out the past is the same people that want to romanticize the past where you the enslaver and they get to be on the porch telling you what to do. And you better be grateful about it too. I don't recall any slaves going to D.C. to protest. You the reason why they don't want them books in the classroom. Do you know why there's such a high population of African Americans in D.C.? Do you know? Research over me search, I'll let y'all do the point on that one, but don't forget how the Nat Turner's Rebellion had the whole country shook because they were worried about people protesting their captivity. You want to know why there's been such an assault on books and education? It's because they don't want you to learn about how slavery really went down. They don't want you to learn about how people actually felt for their enslavement. They want you to go by what massa tell you to think. You see what I'm saying? They want to tell you, based off the victors of the plantation, how the plantation was ran. They don't want to tell you what's putting the blood, sweat, and tears, that perspective of the plantation, because it wouldn't be one that favored them. The good people on the plantation would just build them churches. Being able to read was punishable by death, and you gonna tell me they taught them how to read the Bible? Stop lying.
No.
When Africans were still held captive by white Christian supremacists 200 years ago, they had no freedom to mobilize. Slave codes made it illegal for enslaved Africans to gather unsupervised. They did this to prevent uprisings and rebellions, and to limit their ability to practice their indigenous spiritual traditions. The punishment for the violation of slave codes included things like being sold and separated from your family, public lashings, mutilation, and in some cases, execution. In fact, in the very time period Mike Keller is referring to, a Supreme Court justice said these words, and it sheds light on the history leading up to that moment in time as well. This was in 1857. They had for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. He was bought and sold and treated as an ordinary article of merchandise and traffic whenever a profit could be made by it. This is why we teach about Black history. Pausing here to hold space for the fact that he said that there was a lot of good people on the plantations. He's talking about enslavers, the people who selectively bred human beings. He paints them as benevolent Christians who were kind enough to build churches for enslaved Africans during the winter, who loved them enough to share the Christian gospel with them, who taught them to read the Bible so they could turn from their wicked ways. What you just heard is not unlike what has been done throughout American history. The people who were enslaving Africans were Christians. The colonizers who spread into West and Central Africa in the 15th century were Christians, and they had to reconcile their actions with their faith throughout history. Dr. Albert Rabbitoe wrote about this in his book, Slave Religion. From the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, conversion of the slaves to Christianity was viewed by the emerging nations of Western Christendom as justification for enslavement of Africans. He talks here about how their pangs of guilt were alleviated by this narrative, by the idea that if we didn't save them, they would die as pagans and go to hell. And this kind of rationalization was happening in America too. In fact, an 18th century judge in Boston asserted that Africans were rightly slaves because they were heathens, justly acquired as loot in wartime. A 19th century bishop in Louisiana, Auguste Martin, said this: slavery is an eminently Christian work, citing the redemption of millions of human beings coming from the darkest intellectual night to the sweet light of the gospel. So what are the wicked ways being referred to here? Likely their indigenous spiritual traditions. They turned from their wicked ways and prayed to the Christian God, and God redeemed them. This belief is not uncommon in Christian circles. And it's also an issue of theodicy, which is again the kind of theology that wants to question, interrogate, or defend the goodness and justice of God in the face of the existence of evil. Why Christians routinely hyper-spiritualize Black suffering and in so doing minimize our actual lived experiences. This narrative is another example of that. So no, enslaved Africans didn't turn from their so-called wicked ways. They were indoctrinated, often beaten, not fully allowed to be themselves. And this came at the hands of white Christian supremacists who viewed their ways, their spiritual traditions, their music as wicked and barbaric. And many of the Bible the enslaved were given to use had books removed that enslavers felt could incite rebellion, including half the New Testament and the entire book of Exodus. So whose ways are wicked here? As Janine Hill Fletcher accurately writes in her book, The Sin of White Supremacy, from the Revolution to the Civil War, American institutions were forged with the interests of white Christians at the fore. And the formulation of America as a white Christian nation came by way of genocide, conversion away from indigenous religions, and note this, the suppression of native African practices among those enslaved to build the country.
It worked, didn't it? They didn't protest.
My God, today. Okay, so a few things. Do you think Black folks really had the freedom to just roam about the nation's capital? Enslaved ones at that? Baby, there were things called walking papers where whether you were free or not, you had to have some form of documentation to say why you were not on a plantation. Here's what Black folks did do. Black folks did run away. Black folks did fight back. In fact, there is no point in history of the enslavement of Africans where Black folks did not fight back against their captors. From the shores of Africa to the plantations of the South. You just didn't learn about it, clearly. It's wild that you bring up the mention of reading the Bible when enslaved people weren't allowed to read. And if folks learned that you could read while you were enslaved, you had the threat of death, because you could read. As for the good folks on plantations, just like the way we think that human traffickers are bad people, enslavers are bad people. There were no good enslavers. As for the love that you think that folks had for their enslaved, what kind of love sells a baby from their mother's arms? What kind of love traffics little girls? What kind of love maims, tortures, and ultimately unalives people, and then dare calls itself love? Challenge these lies wherever you hear them. The act of owning someone is barbaric, and only barbarians enjoy that practice and would dare call it love.
Go to Washington, D.C. and have
Content warning before you go and watch the rest of that clip. It is just pure and utter racism. That said, it is what I was taught in Christian school. In a Christian school in the North. It was also part of homeschool curriculum that I was also taught from. If it sounds wildly extreme to you, you are removed from what evangelical Christianity is teaching. There's a reason that they're marching into school board meetings, losing their minds at the mere suggestion that students be taught that racism still exists today. And it's because they don't even think racism existed in the past. They teach and believe that enslavers were mostly good, mostly kind. They teach that slavery was a net good, and not just for selfish economic reasons because it built the wealth of white people, but because they believe that without slavery, black people wouldn't have experienced Christianity. And enslaving a few bodies to save a few souls is worth it. It's horrendous. It's evil, it's twisted, and it's what they believe. If we don't recognize how insidious and prevalent this is, we will not win the fight.
Go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally.
Okay, TikTok, y'all know I don't really cuss on my videos, but what the f***? Oh, protest! They couldn't leave the plantation, man. They were called runaways and they would have been shot, killed, or tore up by dogs. See, this is the disinformation that is being preached or teached to palm-colored people so they will feel better about slavery and what was done to our ancestors. And until America actually becomes responsible or recognizes the fact that we were treated worse than dogs for over 200 years and was promised land and a mule and never got either, then this country can heal. It was built on our backs of our ancestors that were starved and made to work 12, 14 hours a day from sun up to sundown. And then after slavery, they came up with the good idea of sharecropping, which meant they were still slaves, because if you just go to the library and read some stuff. But see, I truly believe that the palm-colored people, especially running for the Republican ticket, are counting on the fact that y'all not going to read. Y'all not going to open your minds in a book. That's why they want to ban them before you can get your hands on one. They're not keeping us from reading now, but they know that you're lazy enough that you will not investigate or try to find out what really happened. And during Reconstruction, and when we were trying to build this country on an even keel, we got unalived, burnt up our property and took our land. We want that land back. So y'all need to just go to the library and go to where they say Black History section and open your eyes, please.
They didn't protest.
Is this real life? Sadly, guys, it is real life, guys. This is Mike Keller. He's Anna Duggar's father. You know Anna Duggar, that's currently standing behind her husband, who essayed his own sisters and now is facing 12 years in jail for CP. That Anna Duggar, well, this is her father. He is an alleged preacher and a definite racist. Allegedly for educational purposes only, and I cannot believe what I just watched. This is Clown World. So according to Mike, with his whole chest, he got up and preached in front of some church, and I don't see how everybody didn't walk out, that slaves did not protest slavery because the people at the plantations was nice and they were actually being punished by God. I mean, I am no historical scholar, but I'm pretty sure it's because they were being held in captivity. If they had tried, they would have been murdered, and they didn't have any weapons to defend themselves. But according to Mike, they were slaves because they would not humble themselves unto God. And the people at the plantation were like super nice besides the whole like slavery and like murder and the essaying and everything, they were super nice. Like, even when it got cold outside, they would look at the slaves and say, hey, do you want us to build a church? I mean, they wouldn't ask them like, do you need something to heat your shed that we got you chained in? Or do you and your family need more food? Would you like a little extra sleep time? No. Would you like to be free? No, they didn't ask them anything like that, when it got cold. They was going to build them a church, though. So Mike is just super impressed that the slaves didn't protest 150 years ago and get murdered. But he says finally 150 years ago that they humbled themselves unto the Lord, and he set about putting a path for them to get freedom. I mean, even though he is the Lord, he couldn't do it like immediately. He had to put people in place for them to get freedom. And eventually, 150 years later, they were able to drink from the same water fountains as the white people, according to Mike, allegedly for educational purposes only. Mike really got up there in front of that church with his whole chest and said, look, what happened to African Americans back in the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, 1500s was not bad. It was a biblical lesson in obedience. Duh. I wish that what you just watched was satire. I wish that the clip had been doctored, but it's not. There are actually living, breathing humans out there walking amongst us with people who follow them that believe this kind of stuff. Imagine the mentality that this person has, allegedly for educational purposes only, that you can marry a white man who is a pervertito, has essayed his sisters, and is currently serving 12 years in jail for CP charges, and stand by him and wait for him to get out of jail. You can have children with him. Y'all can raise a family. You got to stand by him. But you cannot marry a black man who has no criminal record and has a job. What in the toilet brush trash can? So anyways, guys, I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you later. I mean, I know you're not going to have a great day after watching that. I'm not either. But, we can do the best we can, knowing that people like this really exist.
200 years ago to protest against slavery.
Number 1, the Stono Rebellion of 1739. Number 2, the New York City Conspiracy of 1741. Number 3, Gabriel's Conspiracy of 1800. Number 4, the German Coast Uprising of 1811. And number 5, Nat Turner's Rebellion of 1831. Now, I was not going to respond to this fermenting bag of cottage cheese, but I felt the need to take this time to address my people. Stop saying that we aren't our ancestors. It's rooted in racism and anti-blackness, and it's just disrespectful as the fuck. Now I'm going to take this time to address the Mucinex monster himself. I watched your extended family's documentary, and what the fuck? You have much larger fish to fry than to get on here spewing your sludge to the uneducated masses.
You guys have heard everything they said. Like, I agree with everything they said. It is crazy that someone got up on the pulpit and said that. Why did anybody not stop him? Why didn't somebody stop him? Where are his family members? What the heck? Now it makes sense to me why racism is still very much alive, because there are people who think like that, and they are teaching it to people. They get on the pulpit and speak to a lot of people and say things like that. My interpretation of what he said is, you black people, your ancestors did not used to protest, but now you guys always want to protest about every single little thing. Your black ancestors used to be very cooperative and subservient and very meek and humble. But you guys know what got me? You guys know what got me? When he said that they turned from their wicked ways. Who turned from their wicked ways? The slaves that your ancestors used to treat as animals, that were being oppressed, that were being whipped, that were being separated from their families, that were being raped, were the ones that had to turn from their wicked ways. And because of that, God now smiled upon them and set them free. And they got emancipation also through the help of the white presidents, the white saviors. You know, when something is so ridiculous that you can't even be mad at it, you just have to laugh it off. That was what I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that. This is crazy. Wow. Anyway, The church in question that he was speaking at have come out to give a speech. They've come out to make an apology of some sort. Let me just go right ahead and play it.
Fort Worth Church today apologizing for some comments from a guest speaker about slavery that happened last month.
Here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They didn't protest.
So the backstory, that guy is Mike Keller. He happens to be the father of a reality star, Anna Duggar, speaking at Fair Park Baptist Church. Keller is the father-in-law of the church's pastor. We did reach out to the church for comment because this generated a whole lot of social media questions. And we were told today by the church they disagree with Mr. Keller's statement saying that Fair Park Baptist Church affirms that racism and slavery are wrong, sinful, and violate the scriptures. As a part of our faith, they say, we would never condone slavery or tolerate any kind of prejudice against people of color.
See, I'm done. And the thing is, I came across this speech that was made by a palm-colored woman. And in that speech, I went to the comment section and I saw a lot of other palm-colored people talking about how this was exactly what they were taught in Sunday school. That exact version of slavery and how subservient and how nice the slave masters were to their slaves, that man was standing on the pulpit and saying is exactly what they were taught in Sunday school. So is it not funny how they twist things up? They create their own version of history and reality and then pass it down from generation to generation. Thereby, they make the black people look like they are the ones that are difficult and being troublesome because they are fighting for equality till this very day. Like, you guys are too problematic, always protesting. Why don't you be like your ancestors that used to help us and build churches and make everything easy? They were easier to be oppressed, but you guys are fighting tooth and nail. You don't want to be oppressed. Oh my God, give me a break. I cannot believe the ridiculousness. You guys, let me know what you think in the comment section. Have you heard anything that crazy? Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in my next video.